Today on the show, I wanted to talk about Marvel's new Runaways book and why you should be reading it. So quickly before we get into this, if you don't know who the Runaways are, they're basically these kids that once a year would have to gather because all their parents had a dinner party, but the kids weren't allowed to be in the same room for the dinner party. So one year, they all kind of got sick of this. Two of them were growing up quite fast, and they were like, you know what, we're old enough to know what's going on now. Even though some of them were still fairly young at the time, they were just like, we're old enough to know what's going on, so they snuck in, decided to look at what their parents were doing, and they discovered their parents were mass murdering supervillains. Each of the parents had their own specialty, like two of the parents were sorcerers, two of the parents were time travelers, so it was like a pretty big deal and really crazy what was going on. All of these children learned to use either their internal gifts or resources they stole or inherited from their parents. They managed to defeat their parents, but some did die along the way. And then following this, Joss Whedon did a run of the Runaways and like, he's only human, but Jesus Christ. Eventually all the Runaways would go their own way, but Nico Minoru would actually be the breakout star of the Runaways. So a rundown of Nico. She doesn't know how her powers work, she can use magic, but she can only use a spell once. Her spells are basically, she says what she wants to happen, and then it happens. Again, she can only do it once. She also has the staff that comes out from inside of her. It's very like magical girl-like, but she has to cut herself to make the staff appear, because again, Tsunami imprint, it was made at the height of MySpace. After leaving the Runaways, she would join A-Force. A-Force split up and now she is alone, and that is where this new Runaways book starts. So while Nico is alone, failing at making some instant ramen, Chase would turn up. He's a time traveler and he would have his dying girlfriend in his hands, but she died 2 years ago, and her name was Gertrude, and she was a part of the original lineup of the Runaways. She had a pet velociraptor. Chase is like, help her, we can save her this time. And Nico's like, you can't just bring people back from the dead. And he's begging her to try right now because Gertrude isn't dead in this moment, she's still breathing, so they might be able to save her this time. So Nico cuts herself, summons her staff, but while hanging around with A-Force and superheroes, she's used up nearly every spell that she can imagine, particularly healing spells, so she feels like she's got no choice but to summon a doctor. So the doctor is, one, super confused about just randomly poofing into some stranger's house, and two, sees this bleeding girl and is like, take her to a hospital! And Nico's like, well, we can't because she's losing blood super fast, and the doctor's like, I can see that, she needs blood now. So Nico does a blood transfusion spell. She then does a spell to summon x-ray glasses so the doctor can see what's going on inside of Gertrude, and the doctor's like, I can't really tell what's wrong, it's definitely not the spleen, there's just way too much blood. So Nico tries casting two revealing spells, both of them fail, one of them actually causes it to start raining inside, and Nico has no idea what spell to cast, and then she just casts show us where it hurts, hoping that that would work, and it turns out that Gertrude's aorta had been cut. The surgeon has the idea for Nico to cast spells that would be similar to surgeon's techniques, but Nico had already used Stitch before, and that's like a really common surgical technique. So then she has the idea to cast the spell New Aorta, and that's when Gertrude is saved. She then disinfects and closes the wound with magic, and then sends the doctor on her way by using the spell Dorothy Gale, which I really liked. In the moments following this, the two conscious heroes reflect on how they lost Gertrude before. Chase was talking about how he went back to the past to see her death and saw how he messed up before, so he actually used his psychic link with Gertrude's pet velociraptor to drag his past self away so he could pick Gertrude up and take her into the future to be healed. That's when Gertrude wakes up and says, you actually never shut up, do you? I'ma feed you all to Galactus. Naturally, the two are so happy and excited to see her wake up, but while all this was happening, they were being watched. This is what I came here for! So, I'm the type of person that goes into a first issue expecting it to be kind of crap. Usually in a first issue, not much gets done, you don't have an emotional connection to the characters yet, so there's not much in terms of emotional interactions, but with this, it was entirely emotion-based and entirely interaction-based. Like, no matter what the characters did in this, emotions and interactions were at the forefront of it. I also liked how, while it was a life or death situation, it wasn't a stupidly grand scale. Like, yeah, it involved time travel, but what they would lose if she died was their already dead friend. Like, they'd already lost her once before, so there wasn't much to be lost, if that makes sense. It's just so good to see how human these characters are right off the bat. You'd think there isn't much to ask for, but apparently it is. I will say, I was sort of expecting a certain thing out of this because I saw people online calling it an SJW BS book, and I was like, okay, here we go again. Because while I am not an SJW, I am also not part of the anti-PC crowd. I just like good stories and I just like having a good time. So when I read this and I thought back to these anti-SJW types saying that this was an SJW book, I was like, did we even read the same comic? Because where? And so what I think has happened in this case is the people that are so sick of seeing SJW stuff, seeing stuff being so politically correct, have now become more sensitive than the SJWs, than the politically correct crowd. They're just at different ends of the spectrum. It's called the horseshoe effect. I really just didn't think that this was an SJW book. I'm sorry, I just didn't get that from this book whatsoever. And if you did, maybe you're just a bit more sensitive to that stuff than I am. I don't know. It must be a personal thing, because for me, this wasn't an SJW book. There was no political commentary in it whatsoever. So back on topic. The Runaways book is super, super good. I can't recommend it enough. It does kind of make me miss the Young Avengers being like a currently ongoing thing, because the Young Avengers were kind of like evolved into the New Avengers. But seriously, maybe when the Young Avengers movie is announced, we'll see it, because the Runaways and the Young Avengers do frequently team up. And maybe when the Young Avengers movie is announced as well, I'll be able to audition for the part of Billy, because it's really important to me that I play Billy Marvel, so seriously, call me. It's exciting to me to have a book where characters are being human, dealing with human stuff on an extreme scale, but they're still very human. And it's sort of very reminiscent of what X-Men books used to be. This is the type of thing that I like to read, and I'm really excited to see where it's headed if it can keep up this tone for its entire run. Okay guys, that is it for today. So what did you think of this Runaways book? Please let me know in the comments down below. Also don't forget to thumbs up, subscribe, do all of my social links, check out my Patreon, and I will see you next time.